My name is Belinda Humphrey. I am 26 years old. When I was 16, my parents drove me to a gas station at 4:30 in the morning, handed me three $20 bills, and told me I was no longer their daughter. My brother had told them a lie. They believed him. They did not ask me a single question. I did not cry that night. I did not cry for 10 years. 8 months ago, in a Boston ballroom with 500 people watching, that same father grabbed a microphone, adjusted the cufflinks he had worn the night I left, and told the room I owed him $500,000 for being raised. He did not know what I had been keeping in a manila folder for 10 years. I stood up. I walked to the stage. I said one sentence. The ballroom went completely silent. Before I go any further, if your stomach just dropped, please take a second to like and subscribe. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where in the world this story is finding you. I'm Belinda. This is the story of the lie my family burned a house to protect. And the night, 10 years later, I gave it back. Now let me take you back to the morning my brother stopped whistling. It is April now in Reno. From my kitchen window I can see the foothills, still dusted with snow at the top, and a mug of coffee that has gone cold while I have been talking to you. There is a photograph on the table beside the mug. A man in his 60s, holding a small black flashlight on a keyring. His name is Russell Humphrey. He is my uncle. He is also, by every measure that matters, the only parent I have left. People keep asking me when I will tell this story publicly. I keep saying never. And then I keep waking up at 3 in the morning, the time of the original fire, and remembering that silence is what almost killed me at 16. So tonight I am going to tell you the whole thing, the girl who walked into that ballroom in Boston, the girl who walked out, the 10 years between them. To understand it, you have to understand a much earlier night, but before that, you should know how I arrived in Boston in the first place. Russ drove 3 days from Reno to Boston, his old gray Tundra, his thermos of coffee that always tasted faintly like the cedar of the truck cab. He does not fly. He has not flown since 2007. I did not ask why. I knew why. In the back seat hung a navy dress on a hanger, in a plastic garment bag he had bought 2 months earlier from a tailor in Sparks. He had ironed it himself the night before we left. I told him I could iron a dress. He said the steam in motel rooms ruins fabric. We checked into the Sheraton on Tuesday afternoon. 2 rooms, same floor, 3 doors apart. When the elevator opened, he handed me my key card and said, "You don't have to go to this gala, sweetheart. You know that." I said, "I know." He nodded, like a man who had practiced not pushing for 10 years. As we walked down the carpet, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I did not look at it. The IAAI annual training conference is a hard event to describe to civilians. 500 fire investigators, insurance adjusters, federal agents, all packed into a hotel that smells faintly of carpet shampoo and bad coffee. Panels on accelerant chromatography, workshops on burn pattern analysis. People I had read about for years passing me in elevators. My partner Bradley flew in on day 2. Married. 2 kids. The only man at Sierra Forensics who has never once asked me a personal question I did not invite. On the second night, I was standing on the hotel terrace and I smelled smoke on the man next to me. My pulse went up. He turned, smiled, lifted his cigar. Just a cigar. Nothing. I went back inside and sat in the lobby for 10 minutes before my hands stopped shaking. On day 3 at breakfast, Bradley sat down across from me with a coffee. He looked over my shoulder toward the front desk. He said, very quietly, "B, there's a man asking for you at the front desk." I didn't stand. I asked Bradley what the man looked like. He said, "Older. 60 maybe. Suit a size too big. Says he's your father." I drank my coffee. I drank a second sip. I told Bradley to ask security to politely escort the man out and not to log it. Bradley walked over. 2 minutes later, he came back. He didn't fight it, just said, "Tell her I'm staying at the Hilton on Park Plaza." Then Bradley said, "He looks like you, B." I said, "He doesn't." Russ came down from his room 10 minutes later, sat in the lobby armchair across from me without saying a word, took out the morning paper he had picked up in the gift shop, and read the headlines while sipping coffee. After a long while, he said, without looking up, "That was the warm-up. He'll come back." I asked him how he knew. He said, "Because he has not yet said the thing he came to say." I asked what the thing was. Russ folded his paper, looked at me. "Sweetheart, tomorrow's the speech. The last summer I remember as real is the summer I was 5 and Jared was 8. My mother had a green woven hairbrush with bristles soft as a paintbrush. She would sit me on the kitchen counter every Sunday morning and braid my hair into one rope down my back. She always smelled like lavender shampoo and something underneath it. Something warmer, like baked bread. She would hum old church hymns while she braided. Sometimes she would say my hair was the easiest job God had given her that week. Jared would be on the living room floor watching cartoons and whistling along with the theme songs. He was a whistler. He could whistle anything. The Andy Griffith theme. Songs he heard on the car radio one time. He could match the pitch of the kettle when it boiled. My father called him the songbird, and Jared would pretend to hate it, but he would smile while he was pretending. That August, we went up to the Lake Tahoe cabin for 2 weeks. My father lifted both of us onto the boat one morning, Jared first, then me, and Jared whistled the tune the boat motor made when it idled. I keep a photograph of that morning in my wallet still. My father is laughing in it. I do not remember the photograph being taken. I only remember Jared, whistling. 6 years later, on a Friday night in September, Jared broke his tibia in 2 places under a pile of sophomores at a high school football game in Folsom. He was 14 and he was the youngest starter on the varsity team, and my father had been telling everyone at the packaging plant that his son was being scouted. He was not being scouted. But it was the kind of lie my father liked, the kind that became true if enough people repeated it back at him. Jared went to Mercy Hospital. A doctor named Tessler set the bone. They sent us home with a paper pharmacy bag with 30 Vicodin and a refill on the label. My father carried the bag from the car like it was a trophy. "Walk it off, son," he said when they handed it to him. "Best painkillers in the country." My mother read the label too many times. I watched her. I was 11. I did not know what Vicodin was. I did know that my mother was reading a label out loud to herself in the kitchen at midnight, and that nobody reads a paper bag at midnight for fun. The bottle of 30 became a bottle of 60 by the 3rd refill. By Christmas, Jared was sleeping in his room with the door locked. He stopped whistling that fall. I noticed when he stopped. Nobody else did. By the time I was 13, I had a piggy bank shaped like a fat orange cat with a slot in the back of its head. I kept my babysitting money in it. $8 a Friday, sometimes more if I stayed past midnight. On a Tuesday afternoon in March, I picked up the cat to feed it the week's earnings and felt that it was light. I shook it. Almost nothing. I unscrewed the bottom. 2 singles and a quarter where $42 used to be. I walked downstairs holding the cat. My mother was at the sink washing the same plate she had been washing when I went upstairs. I said, "Mom?" She turned around and saw the cat, and her face did this thing I will remember until I die. Her face went still. Not surprised. Still. She dried her hands on a towel that did not need drying. She knelt down so we were eye to eye, and she said, in a soft voice meant to be loving, "Belinda, honey, don't tell Daddy. I'll replace it." She did not say who took it. She did not have to. I went back upstairs and sat on my bed and watched the door of my brother's room. 40 minutes. He stayed locked in there for 40 minutes. That night, I moved my babysitting cash inside an old white sneaker in the back of my closet. I was 15 the day I found the bottles. I was looking for a biology textbook I thought Jared might have borrowed. I got down on my knees by his bed and slid my hand under and pulled out 3 orange pharmacy bottles. Names I did not know. Oxycodone. Fentanyl patches. A label I could not pronounce. They were arranged neatly, like he had a system. My mother was in the doorway when I stood up. I do not know how long she had been there. I held up the bottles. "Mom," she said. "Belinda, please." I said, "We have to tell someone." She said, "If your father finds out, he will lose his mind, he will lose his job, he will lose his reputation." I said, "I don't care." She said, very quietly, "I do." She did not say, "We'll get him help." She did not say, "Let me handle it." She said, "Don't make this our problem." That was the sentence. That was the moment my mother stopped being my mother and became something I did not have a word for yet. I put the bottles back. I closed his door. I went to my room. I sat against the door for 2 hours. I did not cry. I think that is the year I stopped. The summer I turned 16, Jared became a ghost. He was 19. He weighed less every time I looked at him. He came home at 4 in the morning sometimes not at all. My father started getting phone calls at the kitchen table he would not take in front of us. He would walk into the garage with the phone. He would say words like the cabin and the policy and the timeline. I did not understand. I was 16. I thought my father was tired. My mother was depressed. My brother was sick. I did not yet know how the 3 of them fit together. In late October, Jared and I were the only 2 home one night. He was on the porch smoking. I sat on the step below him. He had not spoken a full sentence to me in maybe a year. He looked at me sideways like he was trying to remember my name. Then he said, very softly, "B, if anything ever happens, don't be home, okay?" I said, "What's going to happen?" He did not answer. He put out the cigarette in his palm without flinching and went back inside. 3 weeks later, on November 12th, just before midnight, I walked into our garage to grab a Coke from the second refrigerator. And I smelled gasoline. And I smelled it on Jared. The smell was sweet and chemical and wrong. It clung to the air in our garage like it owned the place. Jared was on his knees, loading red plastic cans into the bed of his Bronco. 4 cans. Maybe 5. He looked up when I opened the door. His eyes were glassy, but the rest of his face was sharp. We looked at each other for 1 full second. Maybe 2. I do not remember either of us blinking. I did not say a word. He did not say a word. There was a part of me that already understood, in the way a body understands cold before the brain does. I closed the garage door. I walked back into the kitchen. I took the Coke out of the second refrigerator. I drank it standing at the counter. I went upstairs. I lay down on top of my comforter with my clothes on. I told myself that whatever I had seen was something I had not seen. I told myself this for 2 hours. At 3:14 in the morning, my father's cell phone began to ring. The ringtone was the chimes of an old grandfather clock. I sat up in bed before I was awake. I knew, the way you know. The Lake Tahoe cabin was on fire. The neighbor on the next ridge had called my father. The fire department was already there. My father was on the phone yelling at someone, his voice doing that thing it did when he was performing distress. My mother was crying with her hands flat on the kitchen counter. I stood in the doorway in my socks. I could still smell gasoline. I could smell it on the sleeve of my pajamas where I had brushed past Jared in the garage. I could smell it in my hair. My father was saying, "How is that possible? How is that possible? Was anyone in it?" "No." "Good. Good." When he hung up, he turned around and saw me. His face moved through 3 expressions in about a second. Confusion, calculation, decision. He said, Belinda, go back to bed. I did not move. I said, Dad, I saw Jared with gasoline cans tonight, in the garage, around 11:30. 4 cans. Maybe 5. The silence in the kitchen got so large I could hear the refrigerator hum. My mother stopped breathing. My father stopped moving. And then, somewhere down the hall, I heard a door open. Jared had been home the whole time. Jared had been listening. He walked into the kitchen barefoot. He had washed his hands. He had changed his shirt. He looked at my father, not at me. He said, Dad, she's lying. She's the one who was in the garage. She was the one with the cans. She was trying to scare me. I watched my brother construct that sentence in real time, like a man assembling a chair. Not one tremor in his voice. My father turned to look at me. His face did the calculation again, faster this time. He landed somewhere I will never forgive him for. He said, Patrick, Pamela, Belinda, listen to me. My mother said, Don't. My father said, Pamela. She stopped. He looked at me. You do not speak about tonight. To anyone. Ever. Do you understand? I said, Dad, I am telling you the truth. He said, Get your bag, Belinda. I said, What? He said, Get a bag. You are not staying in this house. My mother started twisting her wedding ring so hard the skin under it went white. She did not look at me. Not once. She looked at the floor. She looked at the cabinets. She looked at Jared. She looked everywhere in our kitchen except at her daughter. The drive lasted 14 minutes. My father did not speak. The car was a 2011 silver Toyota Camry. The clock on the dashboard read 4:19 when we pulled into a Shell station off the freeway. He stopped the car. He did not turn off the engine. He reached into his wallet. The cuffs of his white dress shirt caught the light off the dashboard. Silver squares with tiny mother-of-pearl inlays at the wrists. He had not changed out of his work shirt before bed. He counted out 3 $20 bills. He held them across the center console without looking at me. He said, You are 16. Figure it out. I took the money. My mother was in the back seat. She did not turn around. She did not say my name. She did not say goodbye. I got out. I closed the car door very gently because for some reason I did not want to slam it. The Camry's taillights went down the on-ramp toward the freeway. I stood on the cold concrete in front of the Shell station with my duffel bag and 3 20s and a sleeve that smelled like gasoline that was not mine. The man behind the counter watched me through the window. I went inside. I asked to use the phone. I called the only number I had ever memorized besides my own. The phone rang 4 times. Russ picked up on the 5th. He said, B? He drove 3.5 hours through the dark from Reno to a gas station off I-80 in Verdi, just east of the California line. He pulled up in the gray Tundra at 7:50 in the morning. He did not get out of the truck. He rolled down the passenger window. He said, Get in the car, sweetheart. We'll talk when you're warm. I got in. He turned the heat up. He drove me to a diner 3 minutes away. He ordered me a hot chocolate and a stack of pancakes without asking what I wanted. When the waitress left, he took his jacket off and slid it across the table toward me. He did not ask me what had happened. He did not ask whose number I had used. He sat across from me, both hands wrapped around his coffee cup, and watched the snow come down outside the diner window. After a long while, he said, B, you're staying with me. Long as you need. We can talk about it whenever you want. We don't have to talk about it tonight. I drank the hot chocolate. I did not say anything. I just drank it. Russ lived in a 2-story house in northwest Reno with a Japanese maple in the front yard. He drove me there from the diner. He took my duffel bag inside and set it down at the bottom of the stairs. He walked me up to the 2nd floor. He stopped in front of a closed door near the end of the hallway. He put his hand on the doorknob and held it there for a second longer than necessary. Then he opened the door. The bedroom inside had pale pink wallpaper with tiny gold flowers. There were posters on the wall I did not recognize. A purple comforter, a wooden desk with stickers on it, a stuffed sea otter on the pillow. Russ said, "This was my daughter Lily's room. She would have been 22 this year. I think she would want you in it." He cleared his throat. "Take what you want off the walls. Leave what you don't. Both are okay." He closed the door behind him on his way out. I sat down on the edge of the bed. That was the first night I slept in 9 months without dreaming. I slept 12 hours. Russ had one rule, and he gave it to me on my second morning in his house. We were standing at his kitchen counter and he was making me eggs in a cast-iron pan. He said, without turning around from the stove, "B, I have one rule in this house. I will not say a word against your mother or your father in here. Not now, not in a year, not ever. They have to live with what they did. That is their punishment, not yours. I am not going to give you mine to carry too." I said, "But," he said, I know. You will hate this rule for a while. That is okay. You can hate it. I am not asking you to like it. I am asking you to live with it." I hated the rule for 2 years. I hated it the way a teenager hates a curfew. And then, one morning when I was 18, sitting in a community college parking lot in my used car, I realized something. The rule was the only reason I had not yet become my parents. The rule was the thing that was saving me. In the summer of 2017, when I was 18, Russ took me to a structure fire scene in Carson City. He had called an old friend, a retired fire marshal named David Reeves. Reeves let me follow him through the burned shell of a single-story ranch house. He did not lecture. He breathed through his nose at every doorway. He pointed at 3 things without saying what they were. After 2 hours, he turned to Russ in the driveway and said, "Russ, your niece has the nose." I was standing 5 feet away. I heard him. Russ smiled. He did not look at me. He just said, "I know." That night, back in his kitchen, Russ took the small black flashlight off his keychain. He set it on the table in front of me. He said, "I bought this the year Lily died. I was going to teach her how to use one. I never got the chance. I think you should have it." I picked it up. I weighed it in my hand. He said, "Trust your nose, sweetheart. The truth always smells different from the lies. Always." I started taking fire science classes the next month. University of Nevada, Reno. Fire Science and Technology. I graduated on a Saturday morning in May 2021 in a black gown that was a size too large. Russ sat in the second row, alone, in a navy suit I had never seen him wear. He took exactly 1 photograph of me holding my diploma. He had it framed at a place near his house. It sits on his mantel now between a photograph of Lily at 12 and a photograph of his mother. The day after graduation, an envelope arrived at Russ's mailbox addressed to me in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a card with a printed butterfly on the front. The note said, "Belinda, I'm so proud. Please don't write back. Mom." I did not write back. I did not throw the card away either. It sits in a drawer in my kitchen now. 2 weeks later, I interviewed at Sierra Forensics in Reno. The man who interviewed me asked why I wanted to do fire investigations specifically. I said, "Because when something burns, it remembers everything." He hired me 3 days later. I started in June. I have been there ever since. The case opened officially in March of 2025. Sierra Forensics was brought in as a contractor by an ATF-led task force investigating insurance fraud across Nevada, Northern California, and Oregon. 12 confirmed arson jobs over 30 months, 8 more suspected. The pattern looked like organized crime, but cleaner, smaller, more personal. Burn jobs were almost always residential. Almost always the owner profited. Almost always there was a young man with a record and an addiction problem who would go down for it if the federal government ever got close enough. The task force had a name for this kind of person: asset. They burned the houses. The owners cashed the policies. The middlemen got a cut. The assets got product. My job was accelerant. I had read every burn pattern photograph the task force had assembled. I had run mass spectrometer signatures on samples from 9 separate scenes. By April, Bradley and I were running a sideboard in our office with photographs of 9 burned-out front porches pinned in a row like a high school yearbook. We were looking for the thing the 9 had in common. It took me until the middle of May to find it. The kerosene was the same. The kerosene was the same in all 9. It was a specific brand of accelerant, M-grade kerosene with a small motor oil binder added in the mix. Old stock, almost industrial. Almost no one used it anymore. It had been popular in the late 1980s for generator fuel in remote Sierra Nevada cabins. By 2025, it was almost a collector's item. You could not buy it new. You could only inherit it. Bradley said, "Whoever's running this thing has access to a stash. Not a lot of people do." I went home that night and I sat on my kitchen floor and I called Russ. I said, "Russ, do you remember the brand of generator fuel my father kept up at the lake?" The line went quiet for a long time. Then he said, very carefully, "B, why are you asking me that?" I said, "Just answer." He said, "M-grade kerosene with the motor oil mix. He had 4 drums of it in the outbuilding. He inherited it from your grandfather when the property transferred in 2003. He never opened them. He told me at the funeral he was going to sell them. He never did. They were in the outbuilding the night the house burned in 2015. I said, "Russ, stay on the line." I did not tell Bradley what I knew. Not that night. Not the next morning. I sat in my office for 2 days with the photographs of the 9 burn sites, and I did not move them. I told my supervisor I had food poisoning. I did not eat. I slept for an hour at a time. On the 3rd night, I called Russ at midnight from my kitchen floor. I said, "What do I do?" He said, "B, you stay on the work. You don't tell Bradley yet. Not because it's wrong to tell him. Because if you tell him before you understand what you actually know, you'll be telling him a story instead of a fact. And fire investigators are paid for facts." I said, "What if my father—" Russ said, "Sweetheart, it's not about your father yet. Right now it is about the 9 houses and the chemistry. If your father shows up in the chemistry, he shows up. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Do not put him in the chemistry because you want him to be there." I said, "I don't want him to be there." Russ said, "I know, sweetheart. That is the part that is going to be hard." The raid was scheduled for the morning of July 30th. Coordinated across 3 states, 6 counties. 5:30 a.m. briefing in the parking lot of a federal building in Sacramento. Coffee in styrofoam cups. Bulletproof vests with white letters. I rode in the command vehicle with Bradley and an ATF supervisor named Vasquez. The radios went live at 6 a.m. 14 arrests at 14 addresses. The supervisor was reading the names off the manifest as they were confirmed. Names I did not know. Names I had seen on intake forms. And then she read, in the same flat tone as the others, Jared M. Humphrey, 29, taken into custody at 06:10 hours, residence 14 Pine Hollow Road, Auburn, California. I did not react. I do not know how. I took a sip of coffee. The coffee was cold. I had been holding it for 40 minutes. I asked the supervisor if I could get some air. She said yes. I got out of the command vehicle. I walked 2 blocks to a side street behind a Walgreens. I bent over a planter full of dead petunias, and I threw up everything I had eaten in the last 24 hours, which turned out to be nothing at all. July 31st. Bradley was at my kitchen table when I came downstairs. He had let himself in with the spare key I had given him 3 years earlier in case of emergency. He had made coffee. He poured me a cup. He sat back down. He said, "B, the name on the manifest. Is he related to you?" I said, "Brother." He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Do you want off the case?" I thought about it for 10 seconds. I thought about Russ's rule about not making my parents damage my carrying. I thought about David Reeves's notes in his garage. I thought about my mother's hand on her wedding ring at 4 in the morning, 10 years ago, twisting until it bruised. I said, "No. I want it cleaner." Bradley said, "Okay." He sat with me until 8:30. Then he left to file the morning's paperwork. An hour later, Russ rang my doorbell. He had 2 bags of groceries. He had a half-pound of bacon, a dozen eggs, sourdough bread, 2 oranges, a quart of orange juice, and a small bunch of dried lavender. He did not ask me how I was. He just walked into my kitchen and started cooking. If your family ever made you choose between the truth and them, tell me below. Not the long version. Just one sentence. I'll read everyone. I asked the ATF for access to Jared's intake interview transcripts the following Monday. Vasquez hesitated. She knew the relationship was now disclosed. After 2 days, she sent me a redacted PDF with my supervisor's approval. I read it at my desk at 5 in the evening with the door closed. Jared had given his recruiter's name in the first 40 minutes. A man named Davis. Davis had connected Jared to the network 3 years earlier in exchange for steady opioid supply. Davis had also, according to Jared's statement, been introduced to him by, and I am quoting directly from the transcript, "my dad. He said it was a way to clear what I owed him." I read the line 3 times. I closed the PDF. I walked out of the office without telling Bradley where I was going. I drove 20 minutes to a gas station off the 580, and I sat in my car with the engine off, and I stared at a dead moth on my windshield for the length of an hour. My father introduced my brother to a dealer, as a way to make the family money back. That was the line. 2 days later, David Reeves drove up to my house in Reno from his retirement place near Truckee. He was 68 years old. He carried a manila folder under his arm. He had kept this folder in a fireproof box in his garage for 10 years. He set it on my kitchen counter. He sat down. He said, "Belinda, I always knew. I just never had a case to do anything about it. The accelerant pattern at the Lake Tahoe house in 2015 was the same family. M grade with the binder. Same ratio. I noted it in my original report. The insurance company did not want a second look. The fire department did not want a second look. Your father had no priors. There was nothing for me to take to anyone. I always knew." I opened the folder. Photographs of burn patterns. A handwritten field note dated November 14th, 2015. A photocopied insurance claim form for $400,000. I read until 2 in the morning. Russ had fallen asleep on my couch. He had stopped going home at night. He did not say anything about it. He just stayed. On a Wednesday in mid-August, I drove to the federal detention facility in Stockton where Jared was being held. I parked in the visitor lot. I sat in my car for 40 minutes. I had a visitor pass already approved. I had a list of 3 things I had written down at 5 a.m. that I wanted to ask him. Why did you tell them I was in the garage? Why did you stop whistling? Why did you tell me not to be home? I sat there. I watched a guard walk in and out of the building twice. I watched a woman my age drag a folding stroller across the parking lot with 2 children in it. I turned my car back on. I drove home. I told Russ when I walked in the door. I said, "I couldn't." Russ said, "That's allowed." I said, "I think about going every day." Russ said, "That's also allowed. You don't have to do the thing for the answer to be right. Sometimes the answer is just that you got close enough to know you weren't ready." I went upstairs and I slept for 10 hours. The IAAI called the office on a Thursday morning. The administrative assistant put the call through to my desk. The voice on the line was a woman named Eleanor Spaulding, head of the awards committee. She told me the board had voted unanimously. Investigator of the Year. The ring case was the centerpiece. The ceremony was in Boston, 3 weeks out. She wanted to know if I would accept. I said I needed 24 hours. I hung up. I almost called her back 4 times that afternoon to decline. I called Bradley instead. I told him. He was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he said, "B, take it. Not for the trophy, for the work. Not for your family, not against your family. For the work." I said, "Okay." I emailed Eleanor back the next morning at 8:15. I accepted. I did not tell Jared. I did not tell my mother. I did not tell my father. I went home that night and I told Russ at his kitchen table. He nodded for a long time. Then he said, "I'll drive you." I said, "I figured." That was the whole conversation. It was the second week of August. The Boston trip was 4 days away. Russ and I were sitting on my back porch at almost midnight. Crickets. The smell of dry sagebrush off the foothills. We were both drinking iced tea. Neither of us had said anything in maybe 20 minutes. And then I said, very quietly, looking at my glass and not at him, "Russ, they had so many chances. The school counselor called the house in 2013. There was a rehab in 2014. My mother knew the bottles were under his bed when he was 19. Why didn't they let any of it work? Why didn't they let me drown him properly when I told them at 15? Russ thought for a long time. Then he said, "B. Saving him would have meant admitting they failed. Admitting they failed was the one thing they could not survive. So they did the other thing. They made you the one who failed instead. That was the trade." I nodded slowly. I took a sip of iced tea. I said, "He used to whistle, Russ." Russ said, "I know, sweetheart." We sat there until almost 2 in the morning. August 5th. The Sierra forensics receptionist transferred a call to my desk phone in the middle of a Tuesday morning. She gave the standard prompt, "Belinda, a man on line 2 for you. He says he's your father." I told her to take a message. She took the message. He gave a number. He did not give a reason. The receptionist's slip said, "Patrick Humphrey, 916 area code," sounded rough, said it was urgent. I held the slip in my hand. I crumpled it into a ball. I dropped it in my wastebasket. I did 1 full hour of work. Then I bent over and pulled the paper ball back out of the wastebasket. I uncrumpled it on my desk. I smoothed it with the side of my hand. I put it in the top drawer of my desk under a box of paper clips. I closed the drawer. I sat for a while. I tried to remember the last time I had heard my father's voice. I could not. I could remember the shape of his voice, the cadence of it, the way it used to drop into a whisper when he was about to say something nobody else was meant to hear. I closed the drawer harder. He called 5 more times over the next 3 days. The receptionist logged every one of them. He did not change his message. He did not raise his voice. He said it was urgent. He left the same number. On the morning of August 8th, a call came in from a different number. A 916 area code, but a cell phone instead of a landline. The receptionist said, "Belinda, it's your mother." I had not heard her voice in 10 years either. My hand went to the receiver. It hovered. 3 rings. 4. The receptionist sent the call to voicemail. I waited 15 minutes. Then I put my headset on, and I listened to the saved voicemail. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. She said, "B, it's Mom. I know I have no right. I'm not asking for anything. I needed to hear if your voice is still your voice. That's all. Goodbye." 26 seconds long. I saved the message. I did not delete it. I did not call her back. I did not tell Russ. I went home and I made dinner for the 2 of us. I did not tell him about my mother's voicemail for another 6 days. The week before the Boston trip, I stopped sleeping properly. 2 hours at a time. 3 on a good night. Russ noticed on day 2. He showed up at my house on day 3 with a crock pot and groceries for the week. He cooked dinner every night. Soup, stew, baked chicken, things with long simmer times. On the 4th night, he said over a bowl of beef stew, "B, you don't have to go to this gala. There is no version of this where you are obligated to be in that ballroom." "None." I said, "I know." He said, "Then why are you going?" I put my spoon down. I looked at him across the table. I said, "Because the 16-year-old version of me is still in that gas station, Russ. She is still standing on the concrete in November with 320s and a duffel bag and a sleeve that smelled like someone else's gasoline. And if I do not walk into that ballroom in Boston, she stays there. Forever." Russ did not answer right away. He looked at his stew. After a minute, he said quietly, "Okay, sweetheart, then I am coming with you." I said, "I figured." He nodded. We finished the stew. He stayed over. August 13th. The Sheraton in Boston. The garment bag from Sparks was hanging on the closet door. The IAAI program was on the bedside table. The acceptance speech I had written was folded inside the program. 4 sentences total. Russ was asleep in his own room 3 doors down. The hallway was empty. The hotel was quiet. I sat on the edge of the king bed in the dark and I pulled up the voicemail from my mother. I had not played it since the morning she left it. I played it now. Her voice in my hotel room at midnight. "B, it's Mom. I know I have no right." I played it 3 times. I did not cry. I stood up. I walked to the window. The Boston Common was a black square below me, lit only at the corners by streetlights. People walking dogs. A jogger. I thought about how many times my mother had not called me back over 10 years. I counted. I got to 15 and stopped counting. I said out loud, to no one, "I never forgot a single time you did not call me back when I needed you. Tomorrow, when you watch, I will not owe you a single tear." I went to bed. The Sheraton Boston Grand Ballroom seats 520. On the night of August 14th, 2025, it seated 496, round tables of 10, white linens. The lights were dimmed by half at 7:30 for the awards portion of the evening. The crowd was a particular kind of crowd. Fire marshals from 23 states, ATF agents in dress uniform, insurance executives, adjusters, 2 journalists from Fire Engineering magazine, 1 reporter from the Boston Globe doing a feature on women in fire investigation. I was wearing a dark navy dress that Russ had ironed for me 3 days earlier in a Best Western outside of Erie, Pennsylvania. I was at table 12. Russ was on my left. Bradley was at table 14. The chair to my right was empty. Eleanor Spaulding came to the podium at 7:45. She introduced the first award. She introduced the second. She introduced the third. The fourth was mine. She read my citation from a small white card. The room clapped politely. I stood up. I walked to the stage. I shook her hand. I took the heavy brass weight of the trophy in both hands. I turned to face the room. The microphone was warm. I had written 4 sentences. I delivered them in 80 seconds. I said, "I want to thank Sierra Forensics for hiring a girl with a duffel bag and a Reno High School diploma 4 years ago. I want to thank Bradley Caldwell for being the kind of partner who shows up at his colleague's kitchen table without making it a conversation. I want to thank the agents of ATF Task Force 7, especially Supervisor Vasquez, for trusting the chemistry. And I want to thank a retired fire marshal in Truckee, California named David Reeves, who once told a teenager standing in a burned-out kitchen that the truth always smells different from the lies. He was right. Thank you." Russ was sitting at table 12. He blinked once. He did not move. He did not clap until the rest of the room did. The applause was the right size for the room. I walked off the stage. I sat back down. Eleanor returned to the podium to introduce the next recipient. The next recipient began to walk toward the stairs at the side of the stage. The side door at the back of the ballroom opened. I saw him from the corner of my eye before I knew it was him. A movement in the doorway where there should not have been movement. The Sheraton security captain was supposed to be at that door. He was not. He had stepped away for 2 minutes to use the restroom. 2 minutes was enough. Patrick Humphrey walked into the grand ballroom of the Sheraton Boston at 8:37 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on August 14, 2025, wearing a charcoal suit that was a half size too large on him and a silver tie with a flat clip. He looked smaller than I remembered. His hair was thinner. He was walking with too much purpose for someone who had nothing to say. My hand went to Russ's hand on the white tablecloth. He did not look at me. He kept looking at my father. He squeezed my hand twice. Then he let go. People at the back of the room began to turn. A few stood. Most thought he was part of the program. Eleanor at the podium saw him last because she was facing forward. By the time she registered him, he was already on the small set of steps leading up to the side of the stage. The next recipient, a man from Phoenix in his 50s, paused at the foot of the stage. He looked at Eleanor. Eleanor looked at the security guard who was now jogging back from the hallway. The security guard was still 10 feet from the stage. My father was already at the podium. He reached around Eleanor and lifted the microphone off its stand with the careful, two-handed grip of a man who has not held one in years. Eleanor opened her mouth to say something. My father turned to her and smiled the small fixed smile he used at corporate Christmas parties. He said, "Sorry, ma'am, just one moment. Family matter." He turned to face the ballroom. He adjusted his cufflinks at both wrists, slowly, the way a man steadies himself before a hard conversation. He cleared his throat. He raised the microphone. He said, "Most of you don't know me. I'm Patrick Humphrey. I'm her father." 500 heads turned, some toward him, some toward me. The reporter from the Boston Globe quietly picked up her phone. Russ did not move. He was watching my father like a man watches a fuse. I had seen those cufflinks once before, 10 years ago, on a man counting out 3 $20 bills at 4:30 in the morning. He was wearing them again tonight. My father raised the microphone again. "Tonight you're all celebrating my daughter. I want to celebrate her too. I do. But before any of you clap again, before any of you give her one more standing ovation, I want her to hear what she owes." Eleanor took a step toward him. He held up his free hand in a calming gesture, palm out, the same gesture he used to use at the dinner table when my mother started to cry. Eleanor stopped. He continued, "Pamela and I raised her, we fed her, we clothed her, we put a roof over her head from the day she was born until the day she chose, on her own, to walk out on us. We paid for her schools, her doctors, her braces, her gas money. 16 years of investment, 16 years. I saw at the back of the ballroom my mother. She had come in behind him. She was standing in the doorway with both hands over her mouth. She had not stepped any farther into the room. She was wearing a beige coat I did not recognize. Russ saw her at the same moment I did. He took a long, slow breath through his nose. His hand was very still. My father took one more step forward until he was standing at the front edge of the small stage. He looked at me. He raised the microphone to his lips. He said, in the same calm, measured, performed distress voice he had used to talk to the Lake Tahoe Fire Department on November 12, 2015. "By the time you add up all of that, the food, the clothes, the heat, the gas, the lights, the school fees, the doctor bills, the years, you know what the bottom line is? You owe us $500,000, Belinda. $500,000. For raising you." The ballroom did not gasp. The ballroom did not boo. The ballroom did the worst thing a ballroom of 500 adults can do to a man holding a microphone. The ballroom went silent. Eleanor at the podium did not move. The security guard at the stage stairs did not move. The journalists were not typing yet. They were watching. Russ did not look at my father anymore. He turned and looked at me. He waited. He did not nod. He did not whisper. He just waited. I set my trophy down on the white tablecloth. I stood up from my chair. 27 steps. I counted them. I have counted strange things at moments of high pressure my entire adult life. I counted the steps from table 12 at the Sheraton Boston Grand Ballroom to the small flight of stairs at the side of the stage. 17 steps across the carpet. 3 steps up. 7 steps across the stage to where my father was standing. 27 total. I did not walk fast. I did not walk slow. I did not look at any of the 495 faces I was passing. I looked at the carpet. I had worn the heels Russ had picked out for me. Low, navy, scuffed on the inside of the left toe from a job in Carson City in May. On the third step up to the stage, my left heel caught the lip of the riser. It almost made me stumble. It did not. I righted myself without breaking stride. I crossed the stage. I stopped 2 feet in front of my father. He was looking at me. He still had the microphone. His mouth was slightly open. He had expected me to stay in my chair. He had not built a plan for what to do if I did not. He was waiting for me to speak first. I held out my hand. I did not reach for the microphone the way you reach for a microphone. I reached for it the way you take a knife out of a child's hand. Slowly. Open palm. No sudden motions. My father looked at my hand for a long second. He looked at my face. He looked at the room. He had run out of script. He passed me the microphone. He did not let go all the way at first. There was a half second where we were both holding it. Then he let it go. I took it. I held it in my right hand at my side. I did not raise it to my lips yet. I took 1 step to the left, so that I was now standing between him and the audience, with my back to him. I wanted the entire ballroom to see my face when I said what I was about to say. I wanted my father to have to look at the back of my head. I wanted him to have to listen to me through the speakers like everyone else. I lifted the microphone. I waited 2 full seconds. Russ at table 12 was the only person I looked at in the entire ballroom. He nodded once. Barely. Permission I did not need but received anyway. I began to speak. I did not raise my voice. I did not shout. I said into the microphone, in the same tone I would have used to read a fire investigation report on the witness stand. You didn't raise me, Dad. You raised Jared. And I think you both know how that turned out. There was a single beat. Not even 1 full second. Just a hiccup of air across 500 breaths. I waited inside that beat. I let it sit there. Then I said, still calm, still flat. I've been paying for him since I was 16 years old. I'm not paying anymore. I lowered the microphone. I did not turn around to look at my father. I did not move. I let the words settle into the room the way smoke settles in a structure after the flames are out. I could see, from where I was standing on that stage, every face in the front 3 rows. The man from Phoenix. 2 adjusters from State Farm. A young woman with a notepad whose pen had stopped moving halfway through a sentence. Bradley at table 14 with both hands flat on the tablecloth. Russ at table 12, hands now in his lap, very still. And at the back of the room, in the doorway, my mother. With her hands still over her mouth. The silence lasted 3 full seconds. In a ballroom of 500 people, 3 seconds is geological. Then a chair scraped, somewhere in the back. Not pushed back angrily. Pulled back, dragged, the legs catching on carpet. My mother had sat down on the chair at the back of the room. She had not made it to a table. She was on a folding chair against the back wall. the kind used as overflow seating, and she had her face in her hands. I could see her shoulders moving. I could not hear the sound she was making. Behind me, I heard another sound. A small, soft animal sound, not a word. My father. I did not turn around to look. The stage was wide enough that I could hear him sit down on the edge of it. I could hear his weight transfer. I did not turn. At table 6, the woman from the Boston Globe began to type into her phone with both thumbs. She was not looking at her phone. She was looking at me. She was typing without looking. At table 12, Russ stood up. He was not the first one to clap, but he was the first one to stand. He put his hands together, 1 slow time, 2, 3. Then the ballroom joined him. I did not stay for the applause. I turned and walked back across the stage, in the opposite direction this time. I did not look at my father. He had his face in his hands the way my mother had hers. I handed the microphone back to Eleanor at the podium. Eleanor took it. Her eyes were wet. She did not say anything. I walked down the 3 steps. I walked across the carpet. The applause was now full, the kind of applause that does not feel like applause anymore, the kind that feels like a held breath being released by 500 lungs at the same time. I reached table 12. Russ was already on his feet. He picked up my trophy off the white tablecloth without saying a word. He picked up my clutch. He gestured toward the side door with his chin. We walked out together. We did not look at my mother. We did not look at my father. In the hallway outside the ballroom, the applause was muffled through the doors. We stood for a moment. I finally exhaled. Russ pulled a folded white handkerchief out of his inside jacket pocket. He handed it to me. I held it. I did not use it. I said, I didn't cry. Russ said, I noticed, sweetheart. I noticed. If there is a Russ in your life, the person who showed up when your real family didn't, go tell them tonight. Don't wait. Tell me their name below, too. In September, my father and my mother were arraigned in a federal courthouse in Sacramento on charges related to the 2015 insurance fraud and accomplice involvement. I was not in court. The ATF asked me for a written statement. I provided one. 12 pages, double-spaced. I did not request to testify. Jared accepted a cooperating witness plea. 9 years, with mandatory residential rehabilitation as part of supervised release. His lawyer told me through Vasquez that he had requested to testify against my father. My mother's case was severed from my father's. She pled guilty on a reduced charge in October. 2 years probation, community service, no prison time. I did not feel anything when I read the email. I did not feel anything when I read the next one either. I had asked Russ once if that was a bad sign. He said it was a body resting. In November, Russ and I drove up to Lake Tahoe. The cabin had been gone for 10 years. The foundation was still there, a concrete rectangle pushed up out of the pine duff with the boiler hookup still visible at one corner. There was a half-inch of early snow on it. I walked the perimeter. I breathed through my nose at every corner. After a while I said, Russ, it still smells faintly like accelerant, after all this time. He said, Sweetheart, that's just memory. That's not the ground. I nodded. I stood at the corner of the foundation where the kitchen used to be. I pulled a small bunch of dried lavender out of my coat pocket. I had taken it from the lavender Russ had brought to my house on July 31st. I laid it on the concrete. I did not say anything. We drove home before dark. In February, a letter forwarded from Jared's rehabilitation facility arrived at Sierra Forensics. 1 page, his handwriting. B. You should have let me drown that night. Thank you for not letting me. I don't have anything else to say yet. Maybe one day. J. I read it once. I folded it. I put it in the drawer in my kitchen with the receptionist's note about my father's first phone call and the unopened card from my mother in May 2021. I keep that drawer because I want the receipts. I do not keep my parents' wedding photograph anymore. That is the boundary. The drawer is not locked. The door is not locked. If either of them ever sends one true sentence, I will know it when I smell it. I am not waiting for it. I am also not refusing it. I am just here, awake, breathing through my nose. Last week, Russ came over for Sunday breakfast. He taught me how to make his mother's pancakes. He is 63. I am 27. He says I have the nose for them. I think he's wrong about the pancakes. He was never wrong about the rest. That's all I have for you tonight. Drive safe.